Whoops, excuse me.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the reminder.
Yes. Yeah, like in the movie theater. Please turn off your phones.
All right. Skinner?
Here.
Skinner here. Anderson?
Here.
Anderson here. Bradford? Jackson? Jackson here. Mitchell? Here. Mitchell here. Stone? Stone here. Wiener?
Here.
Wiener here.
Thank you, members, for being here. Welcome all to the first hearing of the Senate Public Safety hearing this session. We are postponing the adoption of the rules until our next hearing, and we are awaiting the author of the bill that will be presented. But I want to just lay out for our folks in the room, since there's many of you, that we will have 3 witnesses speak about 3 minutes each on different aspects of the bill. And then if others who are here and want to speak to it can say your position and who you represent and be very brief, that will make things go smoothly. So the only real time we're allotting is to the folks who will be the witnesses at the table. And then otherwise, we'll allow the rest of you to indicate your position and who you represent or where you're from. And we will await our author. Senator De Leon, we are ready for you. Would you like to present SB 54?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning to each and every one of you, to our Vice Chair, Mr. Anderson. Good morning. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to present SB 54, which will protect the safety and well-being of all Californians by ensuring that state and local resources are not used to separate families and ultimately hurt the California economy. This past week, the President confirmed some of our worst fears by signing an executive order on interior immigration enforcement. He will not focus on criminals, as he promised on the campaign trail. Instead, his deportation policy will be a dragnet for thousands, if not millions, of hardworking immigrants. The executive order dramatically blurs the definition of what a serious criminal actually is. For example, it calls for the prioritization of anyone charged with any criminal offense, anyone who has, quote, committed acts that constitute a chargeable criminal offense, and alarmingly, those who have misrepresented themselves on an application before a governmental agency and abuse any program related to receipt of public benefits. The latter two are particularly troubling if you understand what undocumented immigrants have to do to survive and provide for their families. As is proven by the executive order, the current administration has used fear-mongering rhetoric of immigrants flooding across the border. These scapegoating tactics are not new to us in California, because we all witnessed the divisive campaign of Proposition 187 back in 1994. As we know, because of our own history in California, that draconian immigration policies do not work. They separate mothers from their children, children from their mothers, businesses from their workers, and undermine California's economic viability. Study after study has concluded that immigrants, and yes, undocumented immigrants, too, are less likely to commit crimes than people born in the United States. In spite of those facts, the executive order will target a broad category of mothers, fathers, and children for deportation by relying on states to act as federal immigration agents. State and local participation in immigration enforcement will come at a serious cost to California. The Secure Communities program, which the President has moved to reinstate through the executive order, led to the deportation of thousands of California residents, many without any criminal conviction. Our former president, recognizing its flaws, terminated it. But that program costs California taxpayers an estimated $65 million annually to help ICE detain people. These policies do not work. In fact, these policies do not make our communities safer, and they won't bring more jobs back home to California or the United States. A University of Illinois study found that 44% of Latinos are less likely to contact police officers if they have been victims of a crime because they fear police officers will use the opportunity to inquire about their immigration status. In 2013, this legislative body passed the Trust Act to limit response to so-called ICE detainers. But the executive order makes clear that we need a new policy that provides greater protection against the use of our state and local tax dollars to separate children from their mothers and mothers from their children. Senate Bill 54 does three things. One, it requires state agencies to review and update their confidentiality policies so that Californians are not deterred from seeking services. Two, it requires public schools, public health facilities, and courthouses to remain safe and accessible to all California residents, regardless of immigration status, by limiting immigration enforcement on their premises. And lastly, it prohibits the use of state and local resources to aid in immigration enforcement. No state or local law enforcement agency will detain or transfer a person for deportation unless there is a judicial warrant. It is incumbent on us to put the proper policies in place so that police and other local agencies can focus on their chief responsibility, protecting Californians, not acting as federal immigration agents. Let me be very clear. This measure does not impede the enforcement of federal immigration law. It simply restricts the commandeering of our resources and tax dollars to do the job of the federal government. With me to testify in support are Victor Alvarez, son of Jose Alvarez, who was detained on a Cal State University Long Beach campus, and Santa Ana Councilmember Sal Tinajero. With that, members, I respectfully ask for a bipartisan aye vote.
Thank you, Senator De Leon. We'll now hear from our witnesses in support.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Sal Tinajero, and I'm a member of the Santa Ana City Council. I traveled here today to ask you to vote yes on SB 54. The California Values Act places urgent need to protect all of Californians against Trump's attacks on our diverse immigrant community. We need our community members to feel safe coming forward to report crimes to police and to access vital services, including schools, healthcare facilities, and courthouses. I'd like to tell you a story of one of my constituents, one that represents the stories of many others concerned residents in the city of Santa Ana. Dalia approached me 2 days ago, and she said, Señor Tinajero, let me tell you what my life is like now. Every morning, I go hug my daughter and give her a kiss before she goes to school. She says, but today, she doesn't let go. She doesn't let go, and I have to pull her arms off and send her to school in tears because she's fearful that I may not come home that night. And this is the way I send her to school every morning, and this is the way I have to go to work. Ladies and gentlemen, my constituents are living in fear right now. Our city council voted unanimously to become a sanctuary city and prohibit entanglement between law enforcement and federal immigration deportations because we don't want our residents to live in terror within our city. I'm here today because my residents in Santa Ana are supported within the boundaries of our city, but we live in Orange County, where other cities like Orange and Tustin are not opposing the president's orders on immigration. My constituents worry day in and day out if they're going to be safe on their way to work and on their way home. Each of us want a better life for our children. We want them to be able to walk on any street without fear. The city of Santa Ana is a city that embraces all residents. Now is the time not to be shy or meek. The time is now to be bold and to send a message to Washington and to the president that we will not take this, and send a message to our constituents that before they get to them, they have to get through us. We need to show our residents that we're here for them. And that is why I urge, in fact beg, that this establishment vote yes on SB 54 to protect all Californians. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Next witness.
Good morning. I'm here to speak in strong support of the SB 54.
Could you please give your name and
Victor Alvarez. Yes.
any affiliation?
I'm the son of Jose Alvarez, who was detained by Cal State police and deported from ICE. I used to go to Long Beach City College. I am one of 6 siblings, all born and raised in the United States. My father was deported on February 21st, 2016, after a Cal State police officer stopped him for a broken headlight and then turned him over to ICE. That night, my dad was on his way to pick me up from work, where he used to work at Krispy Kreme. I saw on my drive-through window that he had been pulled over by police, so I immediately clocked out and asked the officer what was going on. The officer ran my father's name, and it came out that he had an immigration hold. We waited for immigration to clear us out before he let us go. After a few minutes, the officer told us that we were free to go. But when we tried to start the car, it wouldn't start. So we got out to check the engine, and by that time, the officer had told us to get back into the vehicle. It turned out ICE had called him back and asked to detain my father. At that point, my father knew something bad was going to happen. The officer arrested my dad and took him to Cal State Police Station in Cal State Long Beach. At 1 a.m., we got a call from ICE that they had picked up my father. And then 4 hours later, we got a call from him saying that he was in Tijuana and to bring him clothes because he had just the clothes he had on that day. The last thing my father had told me before the police had taken him was that work hard and to support the family. Since my dad was deported, the whole family has been suffering. I had to put school on hold just to work full-time and provide for the family. The problem of police getting involved with deportation affects a lot of people and has torn many families apart. I don't want anyone to worry about having to drop out of school to support their family after a parent has been deported. Please vote yes for SB 54, the California Values Act, because it would help prevent deportations like my father and many families like mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez, and I'm very sorry to hear of that experience with your family. Our next witness.
I'm just here to answer. My name is Angela Chan. I'm a senior staff attorney and policy director at Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus, and we helped to draft this legislation. So I'm just here to answer any technical questions.
Thank you. Now witnesses in.
John Lovell with the California College and University Police Chiefs Association. We're in support of this bill. It actually dovetails with campus policies. It's just axiomatic that if you intertwine immigration enforcement with frontline law enforcement will suffer. People are less likely to come forward, and that is particularly aggravating for us in a campus situation. We have we protect 3 million people. We have a number of people we protect who are immigrants, and we do not want people to be reluctant to come forward. It's an unhappy reality that college campuses have sexual assaults disproportionately, and it is very, very difficult to get people to come forward under the best of circumstances. This bill is a very important, good sense public safety bill, and we're in support.
Thank you. So now, as we can see, there's a good number of folks who are lined up at the mic. And again, if you could indicate your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, we'd greatly appreciate it so that we can hear from everyone. Thank you. Please proceed.
I am Nicholas Gonzalez with the California Civil Liberties Advocacy. We'd like to offer our joyful support.
Thank you.
Eddie Moreno on behalf of Sierra Club California in support.
Michael Young on behalf of the California Labor Federation in strong support. With the strong likelihood of increased worksite rates, this bill is extremely timely, and we urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Kimberly Rosenberger with Service Employees International Union in strong support.
Joshua Golka with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees in strong support.
Good afternoon. I'm Amparo Diaz on behalf of the California State Student Association. We represent students of the CSU system, and we want to offer our support. Thank you.
Sylvia Solis Shaw on behalf of City of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti in strong support.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Christopher Castrillo on behalf of the California Faculty Association in strong support.
Bruce Palmer, Jewish Community Relations Council, Sacramento in strong support.
Tim Molina on behalf of Courage Campaign in strong support.
Christopher Sanchez on behalf of CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, in strong support.
Holding Meshar on behalf of the City of West Hollywood, a sanctuary city, in strong support.
Joe Michael for Equality California in strong support.
Laura Parr on behalf of Students Matter in strong support.
Ignacio Hernandez on behalf of the California Attorneys for Criminal Justice, a statewide association for criminal defense attorneys in support of the bill.
Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers California chapter in support.
Danielle Kando Kaiser on behalf of the Electronic Frontier Foundation in strong support.
Jim Lindberg on behalf of the Friends Committee on Legislation of California. We're in strong support.
Hi, Barbara Barron, statewide policy advocate for the National Council of Jewish Women in strong support.
Patricia Sturdivant, policy advocate for Sacramento section of National Council of Jewish Women. We strongly support and urge passage of this important community and public safety measure.
Sandra Fluke on behalf of Voices for Progress members, business leaders, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists in strong support.
Maya Ingram with the ACLU of California in strong support.
Morning, Senator Skinner, Senator De Leon. My name is Mike Casas from Asian Law Alliance of Santa Clara County, and we are definitely in strong support.
Mr. Chair, members, Cesar Diaz on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council, also in strong support.
Yanina Casillas with the Council on Islamic Relations, the nation's largest Muslim civil rights group. We are in strong support.
Chris Galeano from the California Immigrant Policy Center in strong support. SB 6054 must be passed to ensure that we don't remain complicit in the nationwide witch hunt against immigrants.
Yes. Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Zaina Ozair.
Robin Pomeranke in strong support.
My name is C.T. Weber. I'm the Peace and Freedom Party of California Legislative Committee Chair. For 50 years, we've been in support of human rights. Thank you.
Donna Cullinan from Moms Rising, and on behalf of 100,000 members here in California and 5,000 signatures today, we are in very strong support of SB 54. Thank you.
Mara Darrow, licensed clinical social worker and member of Moms Rising in strong support.
Christine Smith on behalf of the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence in strong support.
Chauncey Smith, Assistant Legislative Director for United Domestic Workers of America, ASME Local 3930, in strong support.
Jean Kwan for the East Bay California Coalition for a Sanctuary State, and the former mayor of Oakland, which has 1,300 Central American refugee unaccompanied minors, 4,000 Dreamers, and a huge Yemeni community. So we really want to thank you, Senator De Leon, for your work.
Jen Flory, on behalf of Western Center on Law and Poverty, we proudly support.
Good morning. Victor Christie on behalf of California Health Plus Advocates. We are the advocacy arm of the California Primary Care Association, representing 1,200 community clinics across the state in strong support. Thank you.
Jeanette Sanipatin on behalf of MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, also in strong support.
Rosa Akil with Policy Link and the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color in strong support.
Marcus McKinney with PICO, California, Policy Director on behalf of our 500,000 members in strong support.
Good morning. Khadija Alam Javed with the Advancement Project in strong support.
Good morning, Sandy Valenciano on behalf of California Immigrant East Justice Alliance. On behalf of our 13 affiliates from San Diego to Sonoma County, we're in strong support.
Good morning, Nazanin Afshar Santo with the Wellstone Democratic Renewal Club and the East Bay Young Democrats in strong support.
Good morning, Zori Whitaker, citizen in support.
Good morning, Jesse Strecker with Jobs with Justice and the Great Day Labor Center based in Sonoma County in strong support.
Good morning, folks. Salvador Sarmiento with the National Day Labor Organizing Network on behalf of our California affiliates and our affiliates across the country, and a heck of a lot of day laborers in places like Orange County, California, in cities like Costa Mesa and Tustin and the city of Orange that have been dealing with a lot of this stuff for a long time. Strongly support. Let's not do Trump any favors. Thank you.
Jonathan Solorzano, Long Beach Immigrant Rights Coalition, we strongly support. Bring Jose back.
Good morning, Pedro Rios with the American Friends Service Committee and also with the San Diego Immigrant Rights Consortium. Strongly support, especially pleased with the provisions that protect border communities. Thank you.
Daniel Meyer, College Center, Berkeley, strong support.
Gervasio Peña, I'm with Great Day Labor Center and Norway Organizing Project, and strong support.
Hi, my name is Juan Guandun. I am for the Labor Center Grayton and Andilon in strong support.
Pamela Drake, also with the Wellstone Democratic Renewal Club and the California Sanctuary Campaign. Very strong support. Thank you.
Good morning. Avni Desai from Community Housing Partnership in San Francisco. On behalf of the 1,200 formerly homeless residents that we serve, we strongly support this.
Madam Chair and members, Jonathan Feldman with the California Police Chiefs Association. We don't have a position on the bill at the time, but we would like to thank the Senator for sitting down with us last week to talk about our concerns. We're going to continue to work with his office on addressing those, but we do agree that local law enforcement doesn't want to be put in the position of tearing families apart. So thank you.
Students from Cal State Long Beach, we strongly support this bill.
Are there any witnesses in opposition? Yeah. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Good morning, committee members. Pro Tem. Corey Salzillo here on behalf of the California State Sheriff's Association. Respectfully in opposition to the bill as it sits today, we definitely appreciate the sensitivity of the issue. We stand ready to continue discussing it with the Pro Tem, with the committee, with all interested parties. And we definitely appreciate the Pro Tem's willingness to continue to discuss this. We've always had a good relationship with him, his office, and this committee. And we intend to continue that, particularly on this bill, as it moves forward throughout the process. We are concerned, however, that SB 54 limits communication and cooperation with our law enforcement partners, and that's really the crux of our concern here today. This issue precedes the new president. It's not really an immigration issue. We dealt with this issue last year on a bill that also dealt with immigration, AB 2792. That would have restricted law enforcement communication with federal authorities. There was a similar issue a few years back when there was a bill that would have attempted to restrict law enforcement at the local level from communicating with federal law enforcement on issues relating to marijuana enforcement. That bill didn't go through, but it was the same subject matter in terms of the policy of this cooperation and communication between law enforcement. So again, it's a desire and a need to allow law enforcement to continue to work together on their own issues, but on where there are issues of significant overlap, of which there are many. That again is the crux of our concern, that it restricts that ability to communicate. We have a need and a desire to work together with law enforcement at all levels of government to keep our communities safe. We look forward to future discussions on this issue, and again appreciate the Pro Tem's willingness to continue to discuss in this committees as well. At this time, we are opposed to the bill. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Members, Sean Rundle with the California Peace Officers Association, a membership of over 11,000 officers throughout the state. Our opposition is similar to what my colleague mentioned about the communication between all of law enforcement and their federal partners. Officers in the state are not immigration enforcers, but they do enforce the law. And in instances where an agency may need to work with their federal partners, whether it is a crime that came about from somebody who started out going through the immigration process, to be able to not communicate, respond to requests, whatever it may be, similar to our colleagues, is our basis of opposition. But we do make a pledge to the author and to any interested parties that we're happy to sit down as well and discuss what may be common ground that we can all get behind to ensure that the communities are safe going forward, but we do oppose at the time.
Any other witnesses in opposition? So you can stay at the table for a moment. Senator De Leon, I appreciate that you have met with at least one of the organizations who have now come before the committee to express concerns, but it seems to me, based on your testimony so far, that the author has openness and that it should be, you should be able to work out language that does what the bill intends to clearly prohibit law enforcement assisting the federal government on immigration enforcement of the type called for in the executive order, while still leaving open the ability of law enforcement to work with feds on other task forces that are beneficial to our state and our communities. So I encourage the communications to continue. And I don't know if, Senator DeLeon, you want to make a comment, not your close, but if you want to make a comment to any of that.
Sure. We have some questions, too.
Okay.
we will continue to work with law enforcement. We did have, I think, some very constructive meetings. We got some very valuable feedback from the police chiefs just last week, so we're going to continue working with them to meet their needs as well. With regards to the sheriffs, I had a personal meeting, I think, day before yesterday in Ventura County with the sheriff from Ventura County. He, although not communicating his support of the measure, just in spirit, conveyed a couple of points that he would like to work with us. With regards to the Peace Officers Association, we have yet to have any communication. So the opposition, I don't know if it's a little premature at this moment before the actual communication, but we will continue to work with law enforcement, no question.
Great. Ma'am, before I call on committee members who have questions, I want to thank you, Senator De Leon, for bringing this bill, SB 54, and I want to make it clear that this bill is more than a reaction. The impact that the executive order has caused on families and communities throughout California is real. As evidenced by the testimony that we heard earlier from, example, Mr. Alvarez, others, and by what we witnessed over the weekend with people held at airports, which seems to be continuing even with the judge's order. So that resulting fear can lead people to not trust our law enforcement agencies, our social service agencies, our schools, and so much more. And when under fear, there can be many consequences that are not good for the health and safety of our communities and our state. For example, fearful of cooperating with government agencies and law enforcement, fearful of reporting crimes, fearful of the seeking services for families, even decisions as detrimental as keeping children out of school. And we're not talking about children who are not legal, but families that may have a single person who has a questionable immigration status, who then feel that their entire families are at risk. So the fear resulting from this executive order does not serve the public safety in our state or our communities. And there's been a lot of press about comments that I made at a press conference in support of when Senator De Leon released the bill. But I want to make it clear, I did not explicitly call for the First Lady to put out her immigration papers, because I do not believe in witch hunts. I don't support them. And it is exactly the type of witch hunts that may result from this executive order that we oppose and that this bill is aimed at trying to prevent. So this executive order would unleash that type of havoc on anyone. And so my real point was, how would the Trump family feel if a member of their family was put under the type of scrutiny that is asked for under the executive order, that then put them under the threat of deportation? So I wanted to clarify that, and let's see what committee members had questions or comments. Senator Stone, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations to you being the chair of the committee. It's a great opportunity to work with you. And certainly I don't want to get into the politics of the executive orders. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for some good policy coming out of this committee. And I worry about knee-jerk reactions that sometimes will cause the reverse of what we're trying to accomplish. And I certainly am very sympathetic to situations like Mr. Alvarez. And I can tell you that in Riverside County, our sheriff does not want to be active in being a representative of Border Patrol or ICE. They have strained resources. Their job is public safety. But the communication issues are very important. And I'm talking about dangerous felons. Senator De Leon, I know you put your heart into this, and I think you should be commended for your goals in making sure that people that are on campuses that are victims of sexual assault that are not here legally have the lack of fear to go to the authorities and to report these crimes. What I'm concerned about is that when we have dangerous felons, undocumented felons that have been imprisoned for battery, vehicle manslaughter, armed robbery, or a sex offense. Is it your opinion that these dangerous felons, number one, should not be deported and should be protected under this bill and potentially if it becomes the law? Because I'm concerned that these dangerous felons are going to be released into our communities without the federal authorities having an opportunity to pick them up and deport them, and may cause horrific, heinous crimes like the ones that we have seen throughout the United States. And of course, the one that comes to mind is the horrific events for the Steinle family and Miss Steinle, where there was no holds on this individual that was deported 5 or 7 times for some serious issues. And then, if you don't mind, I'll just say all my questions at once. If you can respond to them, I greatly appreciate it. And then if you agree with me that these dangerous felons should not be in this country, that they should be, in fact, deported, I'm concerned that you're basically making the state of California de facto sanctuary state. That's basically what this bill does, if it is passed in its virgin form. And if it does, I'm concerned not only about the safety of the residents of the state of California, I'm concerned about the promise of this president to take away significant federal funds that this state needs and depends on to continue the service apparatus of this state. So I look forward to your answers.
Thank you very much, Senator Stone, for your comments. I'll try my very best to sort of remember the questions. If I don't answer directly, please give me a prompt and give me a reminder of the question itself. A couple things. One is that the objective of the measure itself, SB 54, the California Values Act, is to decouple, delink criminal acts from immigration status. In short, get our local law enforcement officers, our sheriffs, our state police out of the business of enforcing federal immigration policy and to keep them focused exclusively in the business of protecting and serving our community. Now, when we talk about our community, we're talking about everybody, Republicans, Democrats, decline the state, peace and freedom. I think an individual came and testified here today, black, white, Latino, African American, Asian American, racial, and mix, everybody, all our California residents. The objective should always be of local law enforcement to protect and serve the community, first and foremost. How do we decouple and delink law enforcement from what are criminal acts and what is immigration status? Now, let me say this, is that I do object categorically and quite forcefully the depiction, the narrative that you have just articulated, because as expected, that has been the narrative that has been perpetuated by the current administration and by other elected officials throughout the state, throughout the nation. The reality is that the vast majority of immigrants, irrespective of their legal status, are law-abiding residents of the state of California. Very hard-working individuals, mothers, fathers, children, teenagers. The vast majority are very, very hard-working individuals, respect the laws of this state and this nation, pay their taxes, contribute to the economy, making us the 6th largest economy in the world. That's actually a very accurate narrative of the reality of today. To depict the immigrant, the undocumented immigrant in this case, as a rapist, as a murderer, I think is inaccurate.
Well, let me make myself clear. I think you're misinterpreting my question. First of all,
that's why
98% of the immigrants in this country are wonderful people that come here to strive for a better life. I'm talking about the very small percentage because your bill is very broad. And I was wondering if you would just kind of tighten it up a little bit. Because I think you'll agree with me that there are some undocumented immigrants that are felons that have done some heinous crimes, a very small percentage. But your bill protects them being released into the community and not communicating with ICE. So if the small percentage are being released from jail for some of these very serious crimes that I've talked about, do you agree with your bill that they should not be deported and we should not be talking to ICE about this very small percentage of people?
Well, I will say
Senator Stone, one moment, Senator De Leon, if you would allow the author to respond fully to the questions you initially asked rather than interrupting.
But I had to clarify one of the questions you missed.
Okay, let him finish and then you can have the floor back. Thank you.
Okay, let me underscore and emphasize what the measure does. Obviously, we decouple criminal acts from immigration status. That being said, it doesn't prohibit ICE from doing their job. The job of ICE and their role is to enforce immigration policy. That is under the exclusive germane and jurisdiction of the federal government. That's what they do at Homeland Security. When Homeland Security or the FBI want to engage and want someone, they usually have a list and they produce a judicial warrant. This measure doesn't prohibit that. I can tell you this, through my perspective as a Latino, as a person of color, as the leader of the Senate, as a resident and citizen of this great state and this great nation, any individual, irrespective of who they are and where they come from, who commits a heinous crime, don't want them in our neighborhoods, don't want them in our communities, don't want them in our state. We don't want them in our nation, period.
Thank you.
Irrespective of who they are and where they come from. Now, that being said, I want to put this in context because let's be realistic with this without overly politicizing this situation, although a very volatile and political situation nonetheless. I think we can agree to that, being a Republican and a Democrat. This is a very volatile and toxic and polarizing and controversial and polemic issue. No question, especially given the backdrop of the presidential election and the recent executive order. We all want safe communities. We all want safe neighborhoods. We want to make sure that the tax dollars that we expend on an annual basis are invested wisely and prudently to make sure our local law enforcement are protecting and serving our community. Worst thing we want to do is, in fact, have police officers leave their beat, leave the communities that they're sworn to protect and serve, to go on and assist ICE federal agents to set up a perimeter around elementary school to wait for mothers to pick up their children. That's the last thing we want. We want to make sure those tax dollars are focused and utilized, for protecting and serving the community. We don't need that to happen. Secondly, and I think it was the testimony today also too, we don't want to increase crime in our communities. And by increasing crime in our communities, we want all the work that has been invested by police officers and police chiefs throughout the state of California, including sheriffs too, that it doesn't go out the window. Because if an individual, a resident of California, is fearful of actually picking up the phone if they're a witness of a crime, or worse, they're a victim of a crime, there'll be many crimes that will go unreported. This is a type of environment that will be fostered throughout the state of California. And that's what we want to prevent. We want to prevent crime from actually increasing. We want to make sure that our tax dollars are being used wisely. And we also want to make sure that police officers don't abandon their beat and go on to enforce immigration policy. In short, immigration authorities will do what they're entrusted to do, what they're legally authorized to do, enforce immigration law. Local police departments, as well as local sheriffs, will be entrusted to do what they're supposed to do to protect and serve the community.
I agree for all of your activities that you spoke about. The public safety should be involved in. No, they shouldn't be doing perimeters around schools. Again, my question is narrowly focused. Are you supportive of any amendment to this bill that would allow communications with federal authorities for some of these dangerous felons, a very small percentage of immigrants that are in this country, to enable them to pick them up in your best interest of what you said, preventing crime from escalating in a community? We don't want sexual registrants back in our community if they are deportable, or those that have been accused and served time for vehicle manslaughter, armed robbery. Again, it's a very narrow amendment.
But the amendment wouldn't be necessary because there's nothing in this measure that would prohibit ICE from carrying out their duties in the county jail, dealing with the county sheriffs or the jailer of the county, which is the sheriff. Therefore, if ICE wants to get somebody, they have every right to do so. And if ICE has a judicial warrant to go in and get that individual, whether they're convicted of manslaughter, whether they're a murder, however you want to characterize this individual to be, There's nothing in this measure that prohibits that communication with local law enforcement.
And Senator Stone, if I may also try to answer your question here, there are several pieces in this legislation that already addresses your concern. There is a section here that says nothing in this section shall prevent the department or any state or local law enforcement agency from responding to requests from federal immigration authorities for information about specific persons' previous criminal arrests or convictions were otherwise permitted by state law. So there is this particular provision in here. There's also another provision that specifically accounts for a federal statute known as 8 U.S.C. 1373 that does not allow a prohibition regarding the sharing of immigration status information and citizenship information. There's a specific carve out for that also. So I believe your concerns are already addressed in this legislation, and that also makes this legislation comport with the specific piece regarding sanctuary jurisdictions in President Trump's executive order, which defines a sanctuary jurisdiction as a jurisdiction that does not comply with 8 U.S.C. 1373. And again, in our bill, SB 54, there's a specific paragraph here that states that we will comply with 8 U.S.C. 1373. So that hopefully should address your question. I do want to underscore the point that the pro tem made, that the vast majority of immigrants, and actually more importantly, that there's a study that came out recently, and I can share it with the committee afterwards, that found that contrary to the anti-immigrant xenophobic propaganda put out by President Trump and the people around him, that sanctuary jurisdictions, sanctuary cities have a lower rate of crime, actually have increased economic prosperity. So it's really, really important that we move away from these types of stereotypes.
But isn't it true that the federal disclaimers that you spoke about, if I may continue?
Chair, I think wants to make a correction.
No, it's all right. We'll continue. Go ahead, Senator Stone.
The federal.
You know what? Madam Chair, we got to treat everybody equally. You cannot editorialize in your. If you're a witness, you need to speak to the subject and not editorialize. And the hate mongering and all the things that are happening are not just and they're not correct.
I appreciate your concerns. I think that the witness was. I think there's
accurately describing the facts.
Yeah, let's continue, Senator Stone. Before you raise the question again, I do want to point out it's additionally in the bill analysis that there does not need to be an amendment because the language clearly states, in addition to what was already described, the ability for law enforcement agencies to cooperate where there is a judicial warrant. So that is already explicit in the bill. You may continue. I also have a number of other committee members who want to speak.
I'll be brief. The disclaimer that you spoke about basically allows a federal agency to contact local authorities to find out the immigration status of a particular person, yes or no. What it doesn't do is it doesn't allow for the local authorities to coordinate with ICE or Border Patrol or any other federal authorities about when that felon is going to be released if they don't issue a warrant. So if the federal officials have to issue a warrant for every single case throughout the United States, including California, that may be excessively burdensome. So why not take the amendment just to exemplify the fact that we don't want immigrants being targeted because they're immigrants in this country if they're here to lead a good, honest life and trying to provide for their families, but we want to send a message to those felons that we are not going to welcome you back into our communities if, in fact, you're being released, and we will cooperate to make sure that you are, in fact, deported.
It's that coordination.
Rather than, I would like to have just Senator De Leon respond, and then I would like to move on to the other committee members who want to speak, since I think the point has been made. Go ahead, Senator De Leon.
I agree, Madam Chair. I think the point has been made. There's nothing in this measure that prohibits communication between local law enforcement and federal immigration authorities.
All right, so we have a number of other committee members who want to speak. Senator Wiener, then Senator Anderson, unless you wanted to go.
I'm not. I don't have anything.
Okay, right now. So Senator Wiener, and then Senator Bradford, and then Senator Jackson, and then Senator Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank Senator De Leon for his leadership on this critically important issue. We, as California right now, need to stand up in a very clear and strong way to say that what is happening in this country is both terrifying and unacceptable. And if California isn't going to stand up and push back and say no to this administration, then I don't know who will. When I was growing up, I learned early on that when you're dealing with a bully, you don't capitulate, you don't cave in. If you cave into a bully and say, well, you're saying you're illegally going to take money away from us, so therefore we're going to do what you want to do and turn in our immigrant neighbors to be deported, and so we're going to cave into you, that's not going to stop him. He's just going to go further and further and continue to do real damage to democratic institutions in this country. So it is up to California to stand up and be strong. Not all states have the ability, politically or economically, to do what we can do in this state to be a counterbalance to this administration. I just want to talk a little bit about our immigrant communities, because over and over again we hear stereotypes and caricatures of immigrants as somehow immigrants are criminals, that it's all about immigrants being criminals. We know from various studies that immigrant communities have lower crime rates than other communities. And so we need to move away from somehow implying, or sometimes explicitly, this president has certainly done that, in saying that immigrants are somehow more likely to commit crimes. It's just not true. People come to this country like my grandparents did, like so many families came here to make lives for themselves, to raise their children, to live their lives. We need to embrace these communities and stop saying that they're somehow criminals. It's not true. And then I just want to, know, in terms of the horrific tragedy in San Francisco around Kate Steinle, that became we became targets for Donald Trump and for Fox News and for others because of this terrible, tragic murder that occurred in our city, for which the perpetrator is being prosecuted. And that became an attack on San Francisco and our status as a sanctuary city. We're proud of our sanctuary city status in San Francisco. It makes us a stronger and better city. But let's be real clear in that situation. The federal government had him, the perpetrator, in custody. They had him in custody, and instead of deporting him, they released him. They turned him over to San Francisco. So why is it San Francisco's responsibility then to turn him back over when the federal government had him in custody and for whatever reason chose not to deport him? And that really points to the fundamental issue here, that it is not our responsibility as a state or as cities to do the federal government's job for it. If the federal government wants to enforce its immigration laws, it can do so. If it wants to enforce its criminal laws, it can and should do so. It is not our job to do that work for the federal government. I support this bill, and I look forward to passing it out of committee today.
Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Pro Tem, for this important piece of legislation. And I want to thank you for meeting with one of my police chiefs last week who expressed some concerns, but after that meeting, he was reassured by your commitment that the gray area that he thought existed as it related to those criminal cartels that are here on visa violations will not preempt those local law enforcement from doing their job, as stated by the senator from the Bay as well. So I am in strong support of this. I think my police chiefs are now understanding what we're trying to achieve here with this measure, to do a fine line between immigration and that which is criminal activity. And I think your bill is a great foundation for making sure that we're clear on that status as it relates to Californians and immigrants here in California. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Bradford. And Madam Chair, if I may, just to underscore the point that Senator Bradford had just articulated, we are working with the police chiefs still today, and we will continue to work with them when we find that common ground, so we can have some language that's prepared and ready for very clear amendments. Some of the concerns were the collaboration that exists within agencies, intra-agency collaboration at the federal and at the state and local level on issues such as human trafficking, on issues such as drug cartels, on the issues such as mob-type criminal activity, in this case, whether it's Eastern European, whether it's drug cartels from within the Western Hemisphere or elsewhere, whether it was Russian mafia. And I know that was discussed and brought up in great detail with regards to the intra-agency collaboration and cooperation. And we want to make sure that we do not curtail any type of activities because, again, if you're an international drug trafficker, human trafficker, we want to make sure that all levels of government work hand in hand with each other, hand in glove, so we can get these folks out of our neighborhoods, out of our communities, out of our state, and out of our country sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Senator Jackson.
Thank you very much. I want to try to, you'll have to forgive me, impose sort of a lawyer's view of this. I know that seems outrageous since we write the laws here, but looking at this, there are basically, I think, 4 issues. One is, what's the goal? What is the claim as to why these executive orders were necessary? What are the facts, the real facts, not the alternative facts, but the facts? And then what can we and should we as a state be doing? And I'll just jump at the first one. I couldn't agree more with Senator Wiener's observations, so I won't repeat them, but definitely I do believe that we have clearly established compassion in this state. And as a result of being a welcoming state, we are, as the good senator from Los Angeles, our leader, points out, the 6th largest economy in the world. And we are because we have invited the smartest, the hardest working, the most committed to their families people to come to California, to work hard, and to be able to at least reach for the brass ring of the American dream. So what is the goal of Mr. Trump's executive order here? Well, we hear, and not assuming that it isn't racist in context, but assuming it really is, to keep our communities safe. That's what I keep hearing from my constituents. So we have to keep our communities safe. I don't think there's anybody in this room that disagrees with that. That's one of the reasons that we've invested so much money in law enforcement. That's the reason we've invested an enormous amount of money in corrections. We think we need to do these things to keep our communities safe. And we all agree. There isn't a person in this room, I don't believe, who disagrees with that. So we want to keep our communities safe. The claim is that in order to do that, our local law enforcement has to engage ICE every time anything happens that would perhaps draw the attention of the police, and then even if not. So we have this grandiose scheme that we, as a state, must comply with ICE and the immigration issue every time, for example, somebody gets stopped because a rear light is out in their car. That story of that family, I think we could multiply that by thousands of times and consider the disruption to that family. That man had a light out in his car. And as a result, he is now in Tijuana. His son, an articulate, obviously very bright young man, can no longer go to school to get an education, to be a substantially contributing member of our society, and he is providing support for his siblings. So is that going to keep our community safer? So looking at that and then trying to get to the facts. NPR had, I think, a very interesting story on this, and I think we all, or at least most people, agree that they are kind of fact-driven. They're not Breitbart or any of the kind of extreme on the left. They are a place where facts matter. The available data on crime, immigration, and safety in cities, they say, does not support the premise for the president's actions. News outlets and researchers pointed out during the presidential campaign that immigrants who are in this country illegally are less likely to commit crimes or be incarcerated than the general population. A fact. The American Immigration Council noted in a 2015 study that the recent period of rising immigration to the United States from 1990 to 2013 also corresponded with plummeting crime rates across the country. A fact. This past Thursday, a new study conducted by Tom K. Wong, a political scientist at UC San Diego, found that there are broad benefits for local jurisdictions that resist cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. They are safer in the aggregate and enjoy stronger economies. Quote, for the first time, we're kind of seeing that crime rates are lower when localities stay out of the business of federal immigration enforcement. Okay? Facts. The feds, and yes, I think some of us do believe this president has some bullying tendencies, but we have a Constitution. And the Constitution says that the federal government cannot coerce by denying funds to someone who doesn't comply with a federal law. So here we are, and I would like, and I want to follow up on Senator Anderson's point, that we should stick to the facts. And policy should be made on the basis, of facts. And the Constitution is supposed to be founded on the basis of facts. So let's talk about the facts. And let's also talk about even today in the LA Times, or yesterday's LA Times. I'm not going to do it. The police aren't eager to help Trump enforce immigration laws. Why? Because the police, and I respect and I think we will all work hard, and I know that Senator De Leon will work hard on this question of communication. There are some nuances there, and because we all want to keep our communities safe, there is no one who understands this issue better than our law enforcement. They do not want to be part of this because they know that our communities are safer when they are able to engage the people who live in them. When you are a victim of crime, you want to be able to report that to the police. The police want to get the bad guys, but if no one will step forward, and I know this as a former prosecutor, if you don't have the cooperation of the victims or the community, you will get nowhere. And that is the bottom line here. So with that, I want to thank Senator De Leon, and I hope in these discussions we can keep to the facts as we all look to the same goal, which is to keep our communities safe. By having these blanket prohibitions, these blanket laws, we are not keeping ourselves safe. But we do have the right to a judicial warrant, and thank God we are still trying to work within the confines of our Constitution. That's what keeps us the country we are, and it should keep us on the discussion and the debate which is called for in these proceedings.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. And obviously, not only if you are a victim of crime, but if you are a witness, or if we look at our, we have been strengthening our community-based policing, community policing, which of course is strongest with the ability to interact with all community members. Senator Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wanted to follow up with Senator Stone, if I may, because I wanted to attempt to understand the point you were making. Before the technical witness responded, I was going to ask if you could show me the language in the bill that you thought was complicating matters for law enforcement to follow up with felons. But in that she provided the clarification. I wanted to follow up with you based on the comments you made and want to understand if you believe current language in the bill makes it excessively onerous for law enforcement to issue warrants to pursue persons who've been convicted of a felony, and if the treatment of the immigrant felon is different than the law enforcement's treatment of a citizen felon, if you will.
Yeah,
It's excessively onerous for law enforcement to have to issue warrants, in your mind?
Well, if you consider the number of warrants that may have to be issued, I'm not sure that the agencies are going to always write the warrants to prevent a very dangerous person from going back into the community. Again, and I want to make sure that I get this clear, is that I believe that 99% of the hardworking immigrants in this country are wonderful people. I serve a large immigrant community in the eastern Coachella Valley. They are very important to me. But they are concerned, and I am concerned, if we have a very small percentage of immigrants that are being released from our jails and prisons that historically may be considered for deportation, that if the feds can't get a warrant in time and are requesting some type of delay, if you will, so they can get to the jail and do a deportation if it's necessary, I think that this bill is making it that much more difficult for the federal authorities to get the most dangerous of criminals that we want to deport to make sure that our communities are safe. That's all I'm saying.
And so you've clarified now twice and made your clear statements that it's a small percentage, but yet and still you have this concern that issuing the warrants would be excessively onerous for this small percentage of people.
I think it could be, but I'm not a lawyer, as opposed to many people that serve on this committee. I look at my analysis. I hear my police chiefs. But if I may defer to the opposition, I'd like to hear whether they confirm what my concerns are.
You know, maybe we could ask the witness that in opposition, maybe since they're legal counsel, they might have some ideas.
Through the chair. Madam Chair,
ahead.
Senators, I think the issue here, and your question, Senator Mitchell, was, is it burdensome to expect?
Is it excessively onerous?
And you mean on the part of the federal government, I suspect, to request that warrant? I don't know that I have a position on whether or not it's excessively onerous. Sheriffs have been put in sort of an untenable position after the Trust Act and with subsequent litigation that sheriffs are precluded from holding certain individuals beyond when they would otherwise be released. And so sheriffs are unfortunately in a position of, we may be holding someone because they've been convicted of a state crime or because they've been accused of a crime, and so they're in our custody, in a sheriff's custody, and we get contacted by ICE that says, do you have such and such a person? And under current law, we are permitted and we do respond, yes, we do, no, we don't. And that's generally the nature of the communications. They don't always have a warrant. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they ask us to hold the person beyond when they might be released. Sometimes they don't. It varies by county. As you know, some counties have ICE officials in the jails, so it's a more seamless process, I guess. So again, it varies, but without a warrant, we don't have any authority to hold the person any longer. I mean, that's pursuant to the Trust Act.
And that would apply to a citizen as well?
Well, I mean, you wouldn't have that scenario where the federal government.
Another federal agency. It doesn't have to be ICE. It could be another federal law enforcement entity.
Yeah, I suspect that's true. If we don't have a lawful reason to hold the person beyond when they would otherwise make bail or be OR'd or be released, then again, we're in that untenable position. We may know that they are accused of a crime, or we may not. We may know the person is undocumented. Most times we don't. So the notion that 8 U.S. 1373 is not that we can still comply with that. All that says is you can report back the immigration or citizenship status. So we may know that, but most likely we don't. So that's not a ICE is going to know that. We won't necessarily know that. We'll only know when ICE calls and says, do you have person X? And then we can either respond or we can't. And I think that's where our concern comes in, is not the notion of the whole, but just the request.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I just
go ahead, Senator De Leon.
A lot of folks may not know, but if you've been pulled over for a DUI, if it's been a failure to appear, a burglary, whatever the charge may be, whether you're a U.S.-born citizen, naturalized, legal resident or undocumented immigrant, once you're booked in a county jail in California, 58 counties that we have here, when you're fingerprinted and you're photographed, your fingerprints go and are checked by Homeland Security. So they know, even if it's a couple of college kids, goofing around and they get booked, for having too much fun, their fingerprints went straight in real time to the federal government. So if the federal government, specifically Homeland Security and ICE, know exactly who they want and the red flag pops up right away, they have to go get the judicial warrant. And I do agree with Senator Stone. This is something that I think we all agree with. The percentage, if it is more than a percentage point or two, is extremely, extremely small. And I think Senator Mitchell underscored that point. It's a fraction. So that being said, for the federal government to go receive a judicial warrant is not complicated at all whatsoever. It's actually very routine. You go have your judicial warrant, you go to the sheriff, you present it, you get your man. It's just that simple.
Senator Mitchell, you may finish your floor, and then Senator Anderson.
Thank you. No, that's fine. And I just wanted to balance that administrative function with the reality of California residents every day. I remember being a member of the Assembly Public Safety Committee, and I think it was an Amiano bill several years ago, where the hearing room was filled with UC Berkeley college students who told us horror stories of crimes that they had been a victim of and their reluctance to go to law enforcement out of this fear. And so as we talk about the real or perceived number of people who fall into the category that Senator Stone repeatedly stated, I think it's important as policymakers that we have a real sense of balance in terms of the numbers of people impacted by this kinds of policy. I will never forget the stories of those students and their unwillingness and inability to seek recourse and call the police, like all of us on this dais are comfortable in doing if we are a victim of crime, out of fear of what would happen to them or their families. And the misinformation out in the community that only our recent kind of national experience will exacerbate in terms of people feeling safe on a campus, in their own homes. So thank you for the clarification.
Senator Anderson.
It's very interesting. It's fascinating what everybody said thus far. But I don't live in a gated community, and I don't have a guard around my house. And I do care about that one individual that violates the law, that's maybe serving in our jail or serving in our prison. And frankly, I want the law enforced on them to the full extent of the law. And if the federal government calls and says, what's that guy's address, or what's that woman's address that's serving in our prison or our jail, I want our sheriff or our state to tell them what their address is. And I also want them to tell them whether they're being held in prison or not, and in which prison. So when they write that warrant, we're not playing hide the pea. We're not playing hide the pea with rapists, murderers, armed robbers, serial drunk drivers, people who endanger and hurt others in our community. Whether you're documented or undocumented, you're still prey. And I don't want anybody to be prey to a criminal. So for that reason, I won't be supporting it today. I know that you are working diligently with law enforcement to get to the best bill you can. And I hope that you address that so when it comes to the floor, you can earn my vote along with many of my colleagues. But I cannot, because I don't live in a rich community that has armed guards and walls like many Californians do. I represent hardworking, blue-collar folks that deserve a break. They don't deserve additional crime. And they don't have a beef with people who want to improve their life, but they do have a beef with every criminal. And I think it's a disservice to lump everybody together and say that we're not going to draw a distinction between heinous criminals hardened criminals who do heinous crimes. And I don't care what country they're from. I want them fully prosecuted to the full extent of the law both federally and state. So for those reasons, I will not be supporting it today, but I do know how hard you work your bills, and I'm hoping that I can get there later.
Senator De Leon, you may close.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, as well as members of the committee, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to present this measure. A couple things. One is that a little reality check, and I say this affectionately to my colleague, the Vice Chair. The vast majority of Californians don't live behind a gated community or have security guards who guard their household or their neighborhood. The vast majority of Californians are hardworking Californians, blue-collar Californians who live in East San Diego County or Los Angeles, South LA, or San Francisco Bay Area and elsewhere. This is a reflection of who we are as a great state. It's really important for elected officials, Democrats as Republicans, to not participate in stoking the fears of everyday Californians. It's really important that we rise to a higher level of moral leadership, that we don't exploit for political purposes. My heart goes to the Steinle family because I think this was a horrible tragedy. And my heart goes to the mother and to the father. And it was very clear, as Senator Scott Wiener pointed out, it was incompetence on part of Homeland Security and ICE and the federal government. It's a horrible thing that happened. It's not a reflection of the hardworking immigrants who come to this country every single day and work their tails off, and from morning to night to provide a living for their family and to actually make life comfortable for many U.S. citizens in the United States of America. It may be of some comfort in this executive order, section number 9A, with regards to, I think, a question that Mr. Stone had with regards to withholding any funds for the state of California. More specifically, this goes to law enforcement. In Section 9 of the executive order, it says here, Section 9A, in furtherance of this policy, the Attorney General and the Secretary, in their discretion and to the extent consistent with law, shall ensure that jurisdictions that willfully refuse to comply with 8 U.S. Code 1373, these are sanctuary jurisdictions, are not eligible to receive federal grants, except as deemed necessary for law enforcement purposes by the Attorney General or the Secretary. Therefore, there's an exemption clause there for local law enforcement and state law enforcement agencies throughout California, throughout the nation, who do not work in a collaborative fashion and pose as an extension of the federal immigration agency. So I think that may bring some comfort to you, Mr. Stone, that law enforcement agencies are exempted in the event that they don't collaborate and cooperate as an official extension of the federal immigration authorities. That being said, last year, again, we spent $65 million of hard-earned taxpayer dollars from California that I think we could be better utilized elsewhere for our taxpayers in California. Now, this word sanctuary city is a very fascinating word to me because it means different things to different people. For me, it's been quite a nebulous definition. There may be some agreement, there may be some disagreement, but I think it's a very nebulous definition. I don't know what it means exactly right now because it gives you the perception, the idea that there's some invisible force shield. And for those who remember when we used to play tag when we were children, and if the base was the end of a car, or it was a tree, or it was a post, a light post, and if all we can do is get to that tree or that light post, we were safe. No one can touch us. It doesn't exist with immigration law. The reality is, if you're undocumented and if you're walking down the street, it can be in San Francisco, it can be in Los Angeles, it can be in Fresno or elsewhere, and you're undocumented and ICE happens to pull you over, they can detain you. And eventually, through due process, if the case is not strong enough, you can be deported. That is the law of the land, irrespective of who occupies the White House, a Democratic administration, or in this case, a Republican administration. But that being said, we don't have to use local and state tax dollars to do the job of federal immigration authorities. I think there's universal agreement across the board, irrespective of your political party, persuasion, your ethnicity, your geographical place of residence, whether you live on the coast or in the Central Valley, Inland Empire, or East San Diego County, that we don't want bad actors in our neighborhood, in our community, in our state, in our nation. We don't want them, irrespective of who they are and where they come from. That's our reality, and that's something we agree with 100%. But I think we also agree, and I think Mr. Stone and Mr. Anderson will also agree, everyone on this committee will agree, that immigrants who come to this country, the vast majority, irrespective of their legal status, are very hardworking, law-abiding residents who pay their taxes every year. And the reality is, with the executive order and the criteria that has been developed, any individual, I can tell you half of my family, would be eligible for deportation under the executive order. Because if they got a false social security card, if they got a false identification, if they got a false driver's license prior to us passing AB 60, if they got a false green card, and anyone who has family members, who are undocumented knows that almost entirely everybody has secured some sort of false identification. That's what you need to survive, to work. They are eligible for massive deportation. So the reality is this has been politicized. This has been polarized to a degree unlike anything we've ever seen before. The executive actions and those who are promoting this in the White House right now make Pete Wilson, then the author and architect of Proposition 187, look like a choir boy in comparison to what's happening today. And it doesn't end up well. I'm not here to give any free political advice to my counterparts from the other party, but it doesn't end up well in the long run. It may seem like a Pyrrhic victory, which is very short term, but it comes at a very high cost. Today, we need to bring our communities together, irrespective of legal status, and we need to, first and foremost, make our communities safe. We've got to make them safe. We've got to make sure we don't increase crime by pitting one group against another and mischaracterizing communities for what they're not. With that, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and members, I will commit myself to work still very, very closely with law enforcement, both local police departments as well as county sheriffs, to make sure that we do everything within our power to make all of our communities safe. With that, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator De Leon. Before I call for the roll, I want to just make a comment that I think what's particularly alarming, and it is not to any way undermine people's legitimate concerns about protecting public health and safety, and certainly the legislature has the responsibility to protect Californians' health and safety. But what's particularly alarming is a very false dichotomy that's occurring right now that is fueled by hyperbole and heated rhetoric. And as our colleague from Santa Barbara pointed out, and as many folks have pointed out, all of us want hardened criminals fully prosecuted under the law, all of us. But we are watching now a pitting of people against each other, a targeting of immigrants, and a pitting of people against each other. That is not right. We know that many people across the U.S. and here in California are hurting economically. They did not recover from the recession. And when you have that type of economic uncertainty and that stress, it creates, unfortunately, easily manipulatable fear. And that's what we are trying to offset. And it's been my experience, as I mentioned on the floor yesterday, regarding another bill that we heard or we voted on, that my experience in the legislature so far is that, of course, with a few exceptions, any of us can sometimes get heated, but both sides of the aisle, in the years I've served, have tended to pretty much stay in a truthful zone. And I hope that we continue to do so. Now, I know that this is a more heated time, but I hope that we can stay in a truthful zone and that we do not manipulate facts for these fear-based purposes. And I would say that by passing SB 54 today, we are making it clear that the state of California will not be complicit with authoritarian policies that do not increase or improve the safety or welfare of Californians or our communities. And now I'd ask for the roll to be called.
Skinner?
Aye.
Skinner, aye. Anderson?
No.
Anderson, no. Bradford?
Aye.
Bradford, aye. Jackson?
Aye.
Jackson, aye. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mitchell, aye. Stone? Stone, no. Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye.
The bill is out. Thank you.
Very much, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you.
We're concluding. And now have no other business, and we will do the rules at our next hearing. The committee is adjourned.